Welcome to my latest YouTube channel. I'm Rosenberg. I'm the author of The Human Magnet Syndrome and the creator of the SelfLove Recovery Treatment Program, or better known as the Codependency Cure. Often, in the middle of a psychotherapy session, like the one I just had, I come up with this new idea, this new way of explaining things. It's just a light bulb. It just kind of goes off in my head, and I expand on ideas or theories or techniques that I've already created. And sometimes I feel like the luckiest guy in the world because I don't often know where the ideas come from. I'm just grateful for having them. But today, during my last session, I created another category for codependency, or what I now call self-love deficit disorder. Let me explain the current ones that are written about in my Human Magnet Syndrome book. And I hope this helps you as much as it just helped my last client. What I did with the Human Magnet Syndrome book, both the one that I wrote in 2013 and its replacement in 2018, I came up with a new definition for codependency. Now, this was before I created its replacement term, self-love deficit disorder, or SLDD for the problem, or self-love deficient, or SLD for the person. What I did was I simplified codependency to mean the following. It is an individual problem that manifests in relationship, where a person gives all of the love, respect, and caring away to an individual or people with the expectation that it is reciprocated or returned. And because they have chosen a narcissist to be in a relationship with, it is not reciprocated. They are upset. They try to get it to be reciprocated. They can't, and they decide to stay in a relationship. So simply, codependency, or SLDD, is a person who gives all of the love, respect, and caring in a relationship, wants it to be returned, it's not, tries to get it to be returned, they can't, and they stay in the relationship. And that definition revolutionized what we know about codependency, because it was able to simplify it so that all personality types would fit. Because up until that point, there are books upon books upon books, many agreeing with each other, many not, explaining codependency as this conglomeration of symptoms and personality traits. And most people with codependency felt stigmatized. They felt like they were dependent on someone. And the reality is codependency doesn't even mean dependency on another person. That has to do with where the name came from. And that's in my book, and there are other videos on that. So in 2013 and later in 2018, through my Human Magnet Syndrome book, I redefined codependency and simplified it for the purpose that now a person's personality could fit into the problem. Because for some reason, codependency up until that time had fit with this unnatural and inaccurate idea that you were passive and agreeable and always likable, and you'd give the person the shirt off your back, the martyr. But in reality, there were codependents who, had personality traits that were independent of codependency. You could lie and be a codependent. You can lie and be a narcissist. You can have an affair and be a codependent. You can have an affair and be a narcissist. You can have an addiction. You can have an anger problem, and the list goes on and on and on. I wanted to create a clean diagnosis so that we would understand codependency and then parallel personality traits that exacerbate the codependency, make it worse, or somehow mitigate or make the problems less painful. So we have the definition of codependency. And then one of my inventions a long time ago was the creation of the active versus passive codependent, or now I call SLD. And the passive codependent and the active codependent, again, are people who are in relationships where they give all the love, respect, and care away, expect it to be reciprocated. It's not, they stay, and they're upset. But one, the passive, gives up. They lose their feeling of power and efficacy. They don't try to change anyone. They just try to fit themselves into the mold that the narcissist or narcissists have cast for them. They fall victim to gaslighting. They do not fight back. In fact, these are the codependents or SLDs that are more disassociated, disconnected. It is by far the most pathological or intensely problematic form of codependency. The codependent, the SLD, the passive SLD, who gives up. And, you know, I think of, and many of you are way too young to remember this, but there was a family, there was a TV show in the 60s called All in the Family, and there was Edith Bunker, you know, the sweet, kind, passive codependent who just gave, you know, to everything and everyone. And if she needed someone to listen to her, she had to passively and sweetly and nicely try to convince people. In fact, my grandpa Chuck was that way. Oh my gosh, Grandpa Chuck would give anything to everyone. At his funeral, there were hundreds upon hundreds of people that had the same story. But Grandpa never learned to stand up to himself and the narcissist in his life. On the other hand, then there is the active codependent. Now these are the pushy ones, the manipulative ones, the ones that are always chasing the narcissist to try to get them to accommodate their needs, to stop their selfishness, to stop their lying, to love them, respect them, and care for them as much as they do. Now, because they're SLDs, remember, SLDs give all the, I call LRC, love, respect, and care, you know, the whole explanation. They're the same as passive SLDs, except they don't give up. They keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And they are the ones that often fight and argue and try to get back at other people and manipulate others. Some of my SLD clients, codependent clients, some of them, not all, the severely active ones, are manipulative and angry and pushy, but they still suffer the same fate as the passive codependent, and they are on that hamster wheel of chasing the love and the respect and caring that they so much want and think they deserve, and they never get it. The difference is the passive codependent gave up, and the active one keeps trying to get something. It reminds me of the saying that was attributed to Einstein, but of course they later found out it wasn't. It is called insanity. It's trying to do the same thing over and over again and trying to get the same result. Now, I think I messed that up, but go with something like that. So here's the reason I'm having this video, and thank you for bearing with the setup. I created additional categories for codependency or self-love deficit disorder. So the new categories of SLDD or codependency is cerebral versus oblivious codependency. Now, many of you know I am very fond of continuums. My continuum that is the basis for my Human Magnet Syndrome book is, I believe, is chapter 9 of the book, and I believe it's the most important part of the book. I believe that opposites sometimes create an understanding of a personality trait that manifests differently in other people. The cerebral codependents, they are the intellectual, introspective, they are the deeply thinking, philosophical ones that read, study. They're the ones that find me on YouTube often. They're the ones that are trying to master everything they can about codependency, SLDD, trauma. The oblivious ones have learned that it's better to not know something than to know it. And they purposely avoid reading books, watching YouTube videos, learning about codependency, learning about narcissism. A good way of understanding the oblivious codependent or oblivious codependency is to use an analogy of the ostrich putting her head in the sand. The ostrich, because of its limited cognitive abilities or its tiny little brain, believes that if it buries its head in the sand, that the problems don't exist. Now, the truth of that matter is I've never met an ostrich. I've never talked to one, and I'm not even sure if that's true. But the saying is a common saying, is if you bury your head in the sand, it seems like you don't know about the problem, therefore you don't have a responsibility to do anything about it. The oblivious codependent believes that by, quote, burying its head in the sand, the problem doesn't exist. And it is an effective defense mechanism for keeping them comfortable. In other words, by burying its head in the sand, it avoids what we call cognitive dissonance. And that is the stress and anxiety of a mental state or thoughts or beliefs or emotions that are upsetting, that go against your values, your morals, or could actually create an unsafe situation. So instead of embracing the truth of say the oblivious codependent's truth is that they stay with the narcissistic person who's abusive, neglectful, or abandoning, and they just remain oblivious to it or bury their head in the sand, then they don't have to realize what's happening and can pretend it doesn't exist. Now, I should say, and please believe me, I am making no comparison of the size of the brain of the oblivious versus the cerebral codependent. It's just a comparison. The oblivious codependent, SLD, uses denial patterns to protect themselves. The denial patterns prove to themselves that if they don't think about something, it doesn't exist. If they don't think about how sad they are, or how angry they are, or how neglected they feel, or how resentful they are, and for that matter, how abused they are, then it doesn't exist. They not only ignore or deny their problems, but they compartmentalize them and rationalize them. So there is a whole host of defense mechanisms that the oblivious SLD or the oblivious codependent use in order to survive the relationship in which there is a disparity in the distribution of love, respect, and caring in the relationship. On the other hand, the cerebral codependent or the cerebral SLD, they believe that the more information they know, that they're going to solve it. They are going to figure out what makes them tick. They are going to learn about the human psyche. They are going to learn about pathological narcissism and covert narcissism and all of the very important topics that I and others teach. These cerebral narcissists, they mistake their intellectual prowess, their abilities to understand complex psychological topics, as a way of understanding the problem and solving it. Just like the oblivious SLDs or codependents, they use defense mechanisms to keep themselves from feeling the real pain of their losses and their problems and their disorder. And their defense mechanisms are blame, are this intellectual pursuit of the truth, because they believe if they just read enough information, just find the right therapist, everything will be made better. Now, it's a defense mechanism because it can't get better because they stay stuck with the narcissist who takes all the love, respect, and caring, doesn't return it, so on and so forth. That is why my initial definition of codependency is so important. But the cerebral codependent, they hold on tight, super tight to the idea that if they read and they can figure this out, they can figure out their own trauma, they can understand the origins of SLDD, the origins of narcissism, that somehow everything is going to fit into place and they are going to have a solution. The problem is, just like for the oblivious codependent, as well as the passive and active codependent, the only solution is to end the relationship, to focus on in psychotherapy the reasons for why they keep finding themselves in these horribly dysfunctional relationships with pathological narcissists, which if you've studied my codependency cure work, and much of this information is available on SelfLoveRecovery.com on my full-length seminar videos, you'll understand that there are complicated reasons for why SLDs are the way they are and why narcissists are the way they are. I cannot tell you how many times I've worked with cerebral codependents, cerebral SLDs, and I had to say, stop reading books. Literally, I made a rule. You cannot read any more books or watch any more YouTube videos. And you would think that's counterproductive, since I am a huge fan of education and reading. And I believe that, that process can set so many people free. But these cerebral codependents, they keep believing that that if they find that one bit of information, that holy grail of information, for which they will finally understand their narcissist and finally understand why they are fighting for something that doesn't exist, for which they keep on this hamster wheel of their own, and that no matter how tired they are, they just push forward, they gut it out, and they end up always empty-handed. And they fight me on on the rule of reading. And it's actually kind of funny. In some ways, it's kind of cute, because once they stop, they realize the intellectual pursuit of an answer does not solve the problem. It all goes down to my self-love recovery treatment program, where we go through those 10 steps to solve the original attachment trauma, the core shame, the pathological loneliness, the SLDD addiction, and ultimately the symptom, and we're talking about my pyramid of what we know as self-love deficit disorder, the conglomeration of symptoms, or codependency. So when they stop this intellectual pursuit and they stop the hyper-analysis, they can go from their intellectual brain, the defense mechanism, remember, it's a defense mechanism, it keeps them from the pain, to the emotional pain, or really it's in the brain, but in a different part of the brain, where the solutions and the healing occur. So I wanted to tell you about the categories: active, passive, cerebral, and oblivious codependence. And I will end with another category, which of course my followers know all about, and that is codependency anorexia. Self-love deficit disorder, or SLDD anorexia, of course the same thing. And that, as many people already know, because I have videos on it, is when the SLD is so defeated and burdened by the repeated and chronic consequences of their choices in relationships. Whether it can be repeated marriages, it could be being abused, neglected, it could be, being the recipient of sexual, verbal, emotional abuse, their children being hurt, losing money and losing their job, gaslighting. It is when they can't handle the consequences of their self-love deficit disorder anymore, and they shut down what I call the romantic and sexual machinery of being human. They disassociate from the romantic and intimate side. Now, for them, the SLD anorexic, it feels like a solution, but really, for many people, is a prolonged phase of their life that is numb and disassociated. We humans were not meant to be devoid of intimacy and physical forms of love. It is a part of our DNA, it's a part of our culture, it's a part of our evolution. And to divorce yourself from that human side is to punish yourself, to fix a solution that never gets fixed. Because in reality, the SLD anorexic will go months, years. I've had SLDs, anorexic SLDs go 8 years. And what happens once they decide to go back to the associated, or they reconnect to their needs to fulfill their intimacy or sexual needs? They find the narcissist, that broken picker that we understand through my human magnet syndrome work, directs them right through the wall that protected them from further harm into the arms of their next narcissist, predictably and always. In summary, codependency, which I defined as a person who is chronically involved with narcissists who give all the love, respect, and caring to others, want it to be reciprocated, find out that it's not, try to get it to be reciprocated, they can't, and stay in a relationship. There are several categories. There is the active, the passive, cerebral, the oblivious, and the anorexic. I hope these categories help you, not just because I want so much for you guys to find the potential to solve the problem, is to take your self-love deficiency, your self-love deficit disorder, and through my codependency cure work, which you can find in its full-length videos and through my professional services at selfloverecovery.com, and find a healing solution so you don't have to live the rest of your life with this much pain. You don't have to be like my mother, who on her deathbed was incredibly codependent to the nurses and my father and never had an experience of self-love. And now you have an explanation for why you are self-love deficient. And may you be courageous enough and brave enough to do the very difficult and challenging psychological and mental health work to solve this pattern and find self-love abundance, which is the codependency cure. Be well and take care. Bye-bye.